on the U.S. for donations because it costs us to rent places and things like that, but and we also do community work. We do have a community mission through our Action Heroes, which can be you, of Force for Good. We are independent, and we're going to be hearing more about the Action Heroes later on. We are here to stay. With your involvement, the Sunday Assembly will make the world a better place. We won't tell you how to live, but we will try to help you do as well as you can. The first point, the Sunday Assembly, is a celebration of the one life that we know we have. And that's me.
Okay, Jan. If I'd had two hands, I'd have kept going like this. But well done. Thank you for covering for me.
Yeah, sure.
And then cover her.
Oh, one thing, John. We got to tell about the bathrooms. Okay.
I've been upstaged for a bathroom.
This is our meeting space, okay? This is where we have our fellowship and our potluck afterwards. And here are the bathrooms. There are bathrooms right here, but you can't use those. You have to go for the long hike, so bring a snack. And so there they are, but they're easy to find. You just keep walking and walking, okay? Now we're going to hear from John, and he's going to perform Chimes of Freedom. The words will be up here. Some of you will know this song, and if you do, join in.
Yes, one thing I want to make real clear. Any time, I'm not one of those performers, this is my song and you can't sing while I'm singing. Doesn't play here, folks. So any of that stuff that's up there, feel free. The more the merrier is my whole attitude toward this thing. So very much appreciate whatever reinforcements or whatever strikes your fancy. If you feel like a solo, go for it. Well, Harry, we're still having issues. And I'm not sure where it came from. Tricky little boogers on these things. Yeah. That sounds good right there. For the queens of down midnight's broken toll. Tucked inside a doorway, thunder crashing. As majestic bells of boats took shadows in the sound, even beneath the chimes of freedom flashing. Flashing for the warriors whose strength is not divine. Flashing for the refugees on the run on the road of life, and for each and every underdog soldier in the night, gazed upon the giants of freedom life. Even though the clouds white curtain in a far-off corner flashed, as the hypnotic splattered mist was slowly lifting, electric lights still struck like arrows fired before the one, condemned to drift or else be kept from drifting. Calling for the aching one on their speechless seeking trail, for the lonesome hearted lovers with too personal a tale, and for each unharmful gentle soul displaced inside a jail. And we gazed upon the giant giants of freedom flashing. Starry-eyed and laughing, as I recall when we were caught, dragged by the track of flowers where they hang suspended. As we listened one last time, and we gazed with one last look, spellbound and swallowed till the tolling ended. Tolling for the aching one, whose wounds cannot be nursed, for the countless confused youths, strung out ones and worse, and for every hung-up person in the whole wide universe, that we gazed upon the giants of freedom flashing.
Thank you, John. Okay, one of the things that we do in Sunday Assembly is we often have a poem, and this poem is called "In the Time of Daffodils," and it's a poem by E.E. Cumming, presented by Norris Boone. Norris will then lead us in a moment of silence as well.
I suppose, is my voice loud enough?
Yes.
Okay. I'm accused of being a loud mouth. Anybody like E.E. Cummings? One of my favorites. His real words me. In a time of daffodils, you know, the goal of living is to grow. Forgetting why, remember how. In a time of lilacs, who proclaim the aim of waking is to dream. Remember so, forgetting sing. In a time of roses, who amaze are now and here with paradise. Forgetting if, remember yes. In a time of all sweet things beyond whatever mind may comprehend, remember seek, forgetting find. And in the mystery to be, when time from time shall set us free, forgetting me, remember me. Moment of silence. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to invite Carol Willis up here. She's going to introduce our speaker.
Barbara Oberlander is a retired history professor from Santa Fe College, where she also served as honors program coordinator and associate chair of the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences. She holds a BA from Wellesley College, an MA in history from Case Western Reserve, and a PhD in the history of American civilization from Brandeis. I got to know Barbara as we have served on the committee of the Gainesville Commission on the Status of Women, which presents Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Ida B. Wells Awards annually during Women's History Month. Barbara's superb organization and excellent judgment add much to our committee. She also co-chairs the Susan B. Anthony Awards with June Littler. Barbara has a special interest in women in American history and has given popular lectures on Eleanor Roosevelt and Edith Wilson, among others. She chaired the board of directors of Oak Hammock's Institute for Learning and Retirement from 2007 to 2009. We are delighted that Barbara is here today to present Who is this Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Thank you very much. much, Carol, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming. It's nice to see some faces I know and also some new faces. The Supreme Court is unquestionably one of the most important American institutions. It is charged with ruling on crucial constitutional issues. At times, the court is very much in the background while social and political changes swirl in our society. At other times, the court is in the forefront, handing down momentous rulings that can be controversial. I think many of us here remember when the Supreme Court decision came down on outlawing segregation in public schools in 1954. And that case, of course, caused a storm. You can still see in parts of the South faded signs that say, "Impeach Earl Warren," because Earl Warren was, of course, at that time, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. So we've had controversial decisions and we've had controversial justices, but never before in American history, in the history of the court, have we had a Supreme Court justice who has captured the popular imagination, has become a pop icon to the extent that you can buy mugs, you can buy t-shirts, you can buy bobblehead dolls, you can have your arm tattooed, you can dress your grandchild or child up in a costume of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That has never been the case. And she seems on the surface incredibly unlikely to be this pop icon. She is 83 years old right now, turned 83 this spring. She's barely 100 pounds. She's barely 5 feet. She looks, as one commentator has said, as nothing so much as a tiny Jewish grandmother. And she is. She is a tiny Jewish grandmother. But here she is, this pop icon. So much so that last year, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History named a new species of mantis, praying mantis, after her. I kid you not. It's called Ilomantis ginsburgi. It's named after her. About 4 years ago, after one of her famous dissents on the Supreme Court, a New York University law student started a blog. It was called The Notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it was a play on the name of a famous rap star from Brooklyn, the Notorious B.I.G. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg became the Notorious RBG. The same law student has, with a co-author, produced a book called The Notorious RBG. It's up there. It's a wonderful book. And of course, then the t-shirts. And even I could not resist. Okay, so who is this woman that's caused this incredible firestorm? What I'm going to suggest to you this morning, briefly, is that if you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's personal life, if you look at her experiences as a woman, as a Jewish woman, as a mother, if you look at what she did before she even got on the Supreme Court, you should not be surprised at all the commotion she is causing. She was born Ruth Bader in 1933 to a middle-class Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York. Her father was in the fur business at a time when it wasn't really so great to be in the fur business during the 1930s. Her mother, Celia, never had a chance to go to college. although Ruth has said she was one of the smartest people she ever knew. She worked part-time as a bookkeeper, and tragically, she died the day before Ruth graduated from high school. Ruth never forgot the fact that she was not allowed to say Kaddish for her mother. In the Jewish tradition, Kaddish is the prayer you say after someone has died. And in the period before the 1950s, the early 1950s, you needed to have 10 men to make a minyan in order to say that prayer. Women were not counted as one of the 10, and Ruth never forgot that. She was an outstanding student. She went to James Madison High School. It's a famous high school where Bernie Sanders and lots of other famous people also went. She was known as Kiki. She was a champion high school baton twirler. She played the cello. She was on the pep squad. She graduated first in her class. There are going to be a lot of firsts with this woman. She went to Cornell University on scholarship, the first in her family to go to college, part of the general immigrant story. And there she met her future husband, Marty Ginsburg. He was a year ahead of her. She graduated first in her class from Cornell, and then she got married. The day of her wedding, her mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, took her aside and said to her, "In every good marriage, it pays sometimes to be a little deaf." Ginsburg has said that that has helped her on the Supreme Court many times. Marty was in ROTC, remember ROTC, and so after he had completed 1 year of law school, he had to go into the Army, and they were stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, where Ruth worked in a Social Security office. But she became pregnant with their first child, her daughter Jane, and she happened to mention that to her boss. Mistake. Her government classification was immediately lowered, as if her brain and her uterus could not work simultaneously. She never forgot that. After 2 years in Oklahoma, they now entered as a team law school. They had both been accepted to Harvard Law School. They had decided to go into the same field, had considered medicine, but Marty liked to play golf. And those of you who are ex-science majors know that the labs are often in the afternoon. So they decided, no, not medicine, law. She arrived in 1956 at Harvard Law School. She was one of 9 women in a class of 500. The dean, Erwin Griswold, invited all these women to his house for dinner, and at the dinner he posed a question: how do you justify taking a place away from a qualified man? Ruth was so stunned, she didn't know how to reply. So she stuttered, "Well, I wanted to know more about what my husband did." At Harvard, she was outstanding. She made the law review, even though she was not allowed in Lamont Library to check the citations for many of the articles she wrote, because no women were allowed in that sacred Harvard Library. She will tell you that women were considered exotic at Harvard. In many buildings, there were no restrooms they could use, and on certain days, the law professors would call only on the women in the class, and really to the point of embarrassment. In 1957, Marty developed testicular cancer. This was, of course, a huge blow to the young family, but Ruth was determined that he was going to finish law school. She went to her classes. She took care of her infant daughter. She found out who in Marty's classes took the best notes. She recopied them. She made sure that he got through. And he did. He graduated not at the top of his class, but he graduated, went to work as a tax attorney in New York. And Marty Ginsburg became one of the most successful tax attorneys in the country. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is probably the wealthiest Supreme Court justice because of him. When Marty moved to New York, Ruth transferred to Columbia to finish her third year of law school. The rumor was, at Columbia Law School, oh no, the smartest law student on the East Coast is coming to Columbia and every one of us is going to drop in rank. That was the rumor. And by the way, she was known not only for her brains, but her beauty. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was beautiful. She was also a physical fitness advocate. Even to this day, that tiny woman works out with a trainer a couple of times a week, and her law clerks have a hard time keeping up with her. She's quite amazing. She was on the law review of Columbia. What's new? She tied for first in her class, of course. And when it came time to graduate, Harvard refused to give her the degree, even though she had taken more classes, 2 years at Harvard and only 1 year at Columbia. Later, of course, I would suggest to you that Harvard regretted this decision, and there were many deans of Harvard Law School who offered her a degree, including Elena Kagan, now in the Supreme Court, but she said, no, I'll wait until they give me an honorary degree. And they did. They did give her an honorary degree just about 5 years ago. Because she was so outstanding, she was recommended for a clerkship on the Supreme Court. She was turned down. Felix Frankfurter said, oh no, no, no. She has a husband, her husband's been ill, she has a couple of children. I work my clerks very hard, I keep them up late at night, and I like to curse sometimes. Unquote. She had, just like Sandra Day O'Connor, trouble finding a job. As outstanding as she was, she said there were 3 strikes against her. She was a woman, she was a mother, and she was Jewish. Finally, one of her professors convinced a federal judge in New York to take her on, and she served as a clerk for 2 years in that position. By 1963, she was teaching at Rutgers Law School. She was one of 2 women. There were only 14 women in the entire country that had tenure-track positions at law schools. The University of Florida was not one of them, which was surprising. Now, her salary was low, and she wondered about this, so she went to see the dean. And he explained to her that, of course, her salary was low. She was a woman, and she had a husband who earned a good salary. She thought about it a minute, and she asked the dean, what about Professor C, who's a bachelor? Oh, yes, he gets the higher salary, too, was the reply. The issue was settled for the dean. It was not settled for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She will come back to this. Things were changing in the 1960s. There were more female students coming into graduate schools of all kinds, partially because of the Vietnam War. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 had been passed, outlawing discrimination in educational institutions. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg began volunteering with the New Jersey branch of the American Civil Liberties Union. The American Civil Liberties Union, of course, is dedicated to defending
suggest just turn the microphone off.
Okay, I think you can probably all hear me. The American Civil Liberties Union was dedicated to defending individual liberties. And letters were coming in that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was reading from women who were teachers, who as soon as they became pregnant were forced off the job. Remember that? You were a teacher and became pregnant, you were asked to leave as if pregnancy was some contagious disease that the children would get. Military women were writing letters that when they became pregnant, they would discharge for, quote, a moral and administrative disqualification, unquote. And her students asked her, would you teach a class on women and the law? There was no such class, but she agreed, she created it, and eventually she co-authored a textbook. She decided to pursue that issue of the lower salary for women at Rutgers, what she called the ladies' discount. And so they filed a class action suit against Rutgers University and won. In 1972, Ruth Bader Ginsburg moved to Columbia Law School, where her daughter is today. She became the first, here we go again, female tenured professor at Columbia. And in 1972, she co-founded something called the Women's Rights Project within the American Civil Liberties Union. And she set out to convince the 9 men on the Supreme Court that laws that treated women separately than men violated the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment is probably one of the most important amendments ever added to the American Constitution. It not only defines citizenship, but it says, essentially, that no state can deprive a citizen of life, liberty, or property without due process, or deny any person within the state equal protection of the laws. What a phrase, equal protection of the laws. Well, the Supreme Court had recognized discrimination on the basis of race under the 14th Amendment. They had never, ever recognized gender discrimination. And so Ruth Bader Ginsburg set out to convince 9 men, step by step, case by case, that these laws that treated women differently, put them on a pedestal, were a violation of the 14th Amendment. She created, and this is my main point today, she created an entirely new field, the field of gender discrimination. She created a firestorm, quietly, carefully, step by step. She brought 9 major cases to the Supreme Court. She personally appeared before the court and argued 6 of them. She won 5. Her arguments were incredible. Now, the first case that she brought before the court might seem to you very minor. It's called Reed versus Reed. And it had to do with an Idaho law that required that men had to be preferred to women as executors of an estate when they were equally qualified. Sally Reed was a single mother. She earned her living caring for disabled people. Her son had died tragically, leaving a small estate of $495. Her husband, who had left the family, was considered abusive, was automatically appointed the executor. She brought the case to court. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg prepared the arguments in this case, and she said that the Idaho law was simply an arbitrary legal choice, and it violated equal protection. The court agreed with her. They struck down that Idaho law. There was a plaque to Sally Reed, who most of us have never heard of, in Idaho. It's so important because it's the first time the 14th Amendment was applied to gender discrimination. Step one. The next case that she took on, and this is one of her favorites, involves a man. His name is Stephen Weisenfeld. He's still alive today. He was a single father whose wife, Paula, a teacher, had died in childbirth. He wanted to collect single benefits under the Social Security law, survivor benefits, so he could care for his infant child. He was denied. Turns out, in the 1970s, Social Security survivor benefits only applied to widows. They did not apply to widowers. Ruth Bader Ginsburg brilliantly argued that the law devalued women's efforts in the economic sector. This is what she said, quote, "Just as a female insured individual's status as a breadwinner is denigrated, so the parental status of her surviving spouse is discounted." And then here comes the killer line. "Just because it's the father, not the mother, who survives, the benefits are denied that would allow him to care for his infant son. The infant is a victim of the law that includes children with a dead father, but excludes children with a dead mother." She's appealing to the court's concern for children. Oh, powerful, brilliant, and the court agreed. She won this very important case. She was so emotional about it that when she heard it on the radio, evidently she had to pull the car to the side of the road because she was weeping uncontrollably. Many years later, she was the person who performed Stephen Weisenfeld's second marriage. They remained friends. A very important case. There were also a number of cases involving the military. As you know, the military and women have a long history of problems. In 1973, Sharon Frontiero, who was a physical therapist at the Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, got married. She applied for additional benefits that were allowed for military personnel who were married. Those benefits affected housing, medical, all kinds of things. She was denied because she was a woman. Her husband was a man. She was not a man applying for the benefits. Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued this case personally before the court. She wore her mother's pin and earrings for good luck, and she said the different treatment implied a judgment of inferiority. In her arguments, she quoted one of my favorite people, the abolitionist Sarah Grimke, quote, "I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks." The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Sharon Frontiero and struck down that provision that differentiated between men and women. Supreme Court Justice Blackmun said, "This is a very precise woman lawyer. She didn't stop talking for 10 minutes. I give her C+." Incredible. Then there was also the case of Susan Struck, and this is a very interesting case. Susan Struck was in the Air Force in Vietnam, 1970s. She became pregnant. The Air Force gave her a choice. Have an abortion on base? What? This is before abortion is legal in the United States, folks. The Air Force said to her, you can have an abortion on the base, the Air Force base, we will provide it, or you can resign. You have to leave. She said, no, it's against my religious beliefs to have an abortion. I want to stay in the Air Force. I want to have my child. Ruth Bader Ginsburg took this case, argued it all the way up to the Supreme Court, that the Equal Protection Clause applied. What man was told to leave the Air Force because he had had a role in the birth of a child? None. The Air Force realized they were going to lose the case, and they waived the policy. So what I'm suggesting to you here is that this woman helped to create a whole new field to make her mark so importantly in this country, in law, before you and I had ever heard of her. She was appointed by Jimmy Carter to the Court of Appeals in 1980, where, by the way, she met Antonin Scalia, and they became close friends. And then, of course, she was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1993. She's been on the court for 23 years. I suspect all of you are familiar with the fact that she's had a number of very famous dissents which have caused a lot of attention. When she dissents, she often reads her opinion from the bench, which is like screaming in a theater. Generally, justices don't do this, but she has. And in a sense, it's not surprising. She's very proud of her majority decisions. She's also proud of her dissents. And one of the things that's fun about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she's great fun to talk about, is that she wears these special collars in the Supreme Court. Have you noticed them? And she has a white collar that she wears if she's going to give a majority decision. Then she has one that's kind of gold and sparkly if she's going to dissent. And you can actually go online and put in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's collars. They're called jabots in French. And you can find, a list of her collars, and you will see the different ones. So I want to conclude by saying that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a passionate trailblazer. She's a fierce advocate for understanding women's rights as a constitutional principle. Someone has said that she's, quote, not a bomb thrower, but a bombshell achiever. And she is. She recently was honored back at Harvard at the Radcliffe Institute, and the dean of the Radcliffe Institute said this about her, quote, she is a passionate advocate for equality and a dispassionate jurist for justice. Whether in the majority or the minority, she illuminates a path toward society of greater fairness and dignity. She elevates the work of the court by respecting her opponents while holding to her convictions. I agree, and I would suggest to you that it is not surprising that she has become the notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thank you. And questions? Yes, Linda.
What are some of her more notorious dissents?
Say that, I didn't hear you.
What are some of her dissents in the court?
Oh. Well, of course, the one that started the blog was the dissent in the case to do with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, one of the most important pieces of legislation ever passed. And the court essentially struck down an important part of the Voting Rights Act, which really renders it powerless. They didn't strike down the whole thing, but they struck down the formula by which you determine which areas have had a history of voting discrimination. And oh, she was furious about that one, and she said, just because it's not raining, you don't give away your umbrella. And how right she was, because those of us who follow voting have seen, I am sad to say, in the last 3 years, efforts on the parts of certain states to restrict voting, particularly minority voting. It's not even subtle.
Within
Not
hours
even
of the time it was
subtle.
done, too.
And it's been done.
Within hours of the change.
Yes. Yes, cutting down early voting, cutting down voting on Sunday. She was absolutely right. One of her famous dissents, of course, and there are a bunch of them, Hobby Lobby, and the case about the being able not to provide contraceptive coverage for employees because of certain religious beliefs. Citizens United, which you said, allows for all the democracy that money can buy. There is a dissent in a case having to do with the partial birth abortion law. There's a federal law against partial birth abortion that is used in cases of advanced pregnancy. And the law was upheld by the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was very upset. And this doesn't have to do with her views on abortion. It has to do with what Justice Kennedy said when he handed down the decision. When he handed down the decision, he said, well, there are women who, after they have an abortion, although we don't have any evidence for this, might suffer mental depression and regret their decision. She was furious because she said it was 19th century talk. This idea that women could not think for themselves and that he was projecting on the basis of no evidence that some women might regret that they had an abortion and therefore you should uphold this law. And so it was his thinking that she objected to, and she has said over and over and over that having the right to decide whether you want a child or not is a fundamental woman's right. Absolutely fundamental, essential. So those are some of her famous dissents. And the majority, and of course there was the dissent in the Lilly Ledbetter case. You all know about Lilly Ledbetter. She worked for Goodyear, and she had worked for Goodyear for 20 years. A woman who essentially really had come up through the ranks of the Goodyear tire plant, and then in Alabama she worked, let's see, from 1978 to 1998 for this Goodyear plant. A woman with not much education. She had worked her way up, and she had become essentially an area manager. Just before she retired in 1998, she received an anonymous letter saying that the men at Goodyear who had similar positions were all paid more. She was making, that's why I pulled out my notes here, $3,727 a month. The lowest paid man, same position, same job description, was making $4,286 a month, and the highest was making $5,236. a month. So she brought a case under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. At first, she won the case, and a jury awarded her millions of dollars. But then she appealed, and as it got to the Supreme Court said, sorry, under Title VII, you have 180 days in which to bring a case. She hadn't brought the case within 180 days. So her suit against Goodyear was invalid. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you could see the smoke out of her. She said, okay, let's think about this. She didn't know that she was being discriminated against pay-wise until she retired. Most women don't know that they are being discriminated against until someone tells them, or they bother to look up salaries, if the salaries are public. And she said it's an insidious way in which women are victims of pay discrimination, and that the court had a parsimonious, stingy view of the law, and she hoped that Congress would correct it. And they did. As soon as President Obama took office, he signed the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, which took care of that problem about the time in which you have to bring a discrimination case. And she has a picture of the signing of that law up in her office, and it's signed by Obama saying, thanks for helping create a more equal and just society. So there's Lilly Ledbetter. That was a very important case, pay discrimination. Anything else about her? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering about her health. I know she's had health problems in the last few years. In fact, I remember reading some people thinking she should step down while Obama's president so he could pick her successor. I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I really don't know. But I mean, I was just wondering, 83 is not particularly old, but the closer I get to that, the younger it seems. But I was just wondering if you could speak to her health and how many more years she might have on the Supreme Court.
Oh, I hope forever. What can I tell you? But I suspect it's clear to all of you that I'm a great admirer of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's had 2 bouts with cancer, and she also had a cardiac issue. During her bouts with cancer, when she received chemotherapy, she never missed a day on the floor. She would do the chemotherapy at the end of the week, so she'd have the weekend to recover, and then she'd come. She has never missed a day on the floor. You will note that you often see her wearing gloves, and she wears gloves because her hands were damaged, from the intravenous constantly. There's no way that Obama could have gotten through the Senate somebody of her caliber and her views in his presidency, and that's part of the reason that she hasn't resigned. What's going to happen now after the election, I don't know. But the Supreme Court is so very important. We are still living with the results of the 2000 presidential election, I may say, because of the people who were appointed to the Supreme Court. And some of those decisions are horrible. The voting rights decision, in my view, is horrible. Horrible. When, as a historian, when I look at the restrictions we've had on voting rights in this country and how we fought to get that voting rights law and to have that emasculated now, terrible decision. Citizens United, that's the one. If Ruth Bader Ginsburg had a magic wand, she'd change that. How much money has already been spent in this presidential campaign? How much more money is going to be spent when we have so many people in this country living on the edge? It's horrible. Horrible. And it'll take a constitutional amendment to get rid of that Citizens United decision or a law trying to overturn it. So that's why she stays on the court. But on the other hand, now we've got 4-4. Merrick Garland can't even be considered or talked to or vetted in any way at all. And so this is a terrible situation. The court needs to be able to function. So I don't know. My answer is
We have music, A Place in the Sun, by John, and this is a sing-along, we hope. And we're going to be passing the hat. Your generosity is always appreciated. I got a hat. And this is money that will be spent to help us with our rent, to help us with other things that we need to buy. We're going to be at a couple of events, and we're going to buy some banners and things like that. And also we do some work in the community, and all of this goes to help all of those things. So, well, we're passing the hat. We're going to be singing A Place in the Sun. So, take it away, John.
I'm sorry, Rob?
Turn the volume.
I think he already did.
Well, it needs more.
needs to be turned down.
Turn down the volume.
It's way too
All right, you got it? Okay.
Well, I can't control that speaker.
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, done.
That one's, that's Harry's.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
Gary's
okay.
thing. Yeah.
Okay, how's that? Is that any better, folks?
Well,
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet. That's fine.
We have to first hear it, and then we know.
Okay.
that's
Okay. First of all, thank you, Professor. I, for one, am impressed. So thank you very much. A lot I didn't know. Somebody I've got a great respect for, but I didn't know. So thank you very much for that. This is a song that was actually one of Stevie Wonder's, I think, second hit or third hit. But not too many people know it, but I thought it would be extremely appropriate considering the talk today. How many people out here actually know this song or have heard it before? 2, 3. Okay, well, it's pretty easy, so we'll kind of, what I thought we could do is maybe just try it kind of like a teaching go round once. And then go through the song. Give everybody a chance to hear it. Because as I said earlier, the more the merrier on this thing. So this is kind of a slowed down version of it to make it a little easier. That you'll be able to kind of keep up with it a little bit. And then the other speed goes a little bit quicker. This is just the chorus that we're going to try to learn. And so we'll kind of give it a shot and see how it works out. Maybe a couple more people can find a voice to help along with this thing. There's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone, where my poor restless heart got to run. There's a place in the sun, and before my life is done, got to find me a place in the sun. Wow, a lot of people picked that up pretty quickly. Cool, I like that. So we're going to try to do that maybe one more time with a little bit pick up in the tempo, and then dress rehearsal's over, and we'll try it for real. There's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone, where my poor restless heart gotta run. There's a place in the sun, by Jove, I think we might have a choir here. So, this is the real thing, everybody. And if you know the verse, don't hesitate to join in on that too. Like a long, lonely stream, I keep running towards a dream, moving on, moving on. Like a branch on a tree, I keep reaching to be free, moving on, moving on. There's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone, where my poor restless heart gotta run. And there's a place in the sun, and before my life is done, got to find me a place in the sun. Like an old dusty road, I get weary from the load, moving on, moving on. Like this tired, troubled bird, I've been rolling since my birth, moving on, moving on. There's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone, where my poor restless heart got to run. There's a place in the sun, and before my life is done, gotta find me a place in the sun. There's a place in the sun where there's hope for everyone, where my poor restless heart got to run. There's a place in the sun, and before my life is done, gotta find me a place in the sun. Got to find me a place in the sun.
Okay, we're going to give you a chance to find a place in the sun because I want Roxanne. This is not, this is there. That's the air conditioner. Okay, we do a couple of things. One of them is a Grace Marketplace, and Roxanne is going to tell you a little bit about Grace Marketplace, and then it's not listed here, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Pride March, which is coming up, which is another opportunity to have your place in the sun.
I'm a volunteer at Grace Marketplace. I go every Wednesday to help prepare breakfast and serve in the line. It's a lot of fun. It's one of the highlights of my week. I really love doing it. Grace Marketplace is in need of volunteers, so if you have any interest at all in volunteering out there, you can go to gracemarketplace.org or gracemarketplacevolunteer.org and sign up. The other thing that I want to talk about though is we have twice helped to prepare dinner. We've had a wonderful time doing that. What Grace has done now, they have two chefs. One does the breakfast and lunch, and then they have a chef for dinner. So for dinner, what they have done is they have 3 different dinners that we can pay for, and then help to prepare and serve. So the Sunday Assembly has dedicated enough money to this effort that we can do it again this fall. So if you're interested in doing that, you don't have to stay you can come and help as long as you can, and then you don't have to stay to serve, or you can stay to serve, whatever you want to do. They're very, very flexible. They have in-house volunteers who help also. So just let me know if you're interested in helping prepare dinner. I can use as many as 6 people to do that. Thank you.
And the other, and we have a picture of us up there. Yes. Roxanne?
Do you know when we're going to do the dinner?
I can't hear.
You know when we're going to do the dinner?
When you're going to do the
No,
dinner?
I need to find out I have enough volunteers. It'll be a Friday.
Okay.
Okay. We do have, other opportunities come up, and we have these cards that we'd like you to fill out. It tells us your name and the best way to contact you. If you put your email address on here, please make it legible. I'm a grammar school teacher, and I know about that. And your phone number. And on the back of the card, which is nice and blank, if you have something that you would, a talk you would like to hear, or a speaker that you would like to hear, would you put it on the back of the card, and we can contact people, we can arrange things. There's a team of about 13 to 14 of us that work on Sunday Assembly, getting it together once a month. And so we're very cognizant of what your needs are, or any criticism. Let us know, because we'd like this to really fly in Gainesville. I think this is very necessary. We are the only Sunday Assembly right now active in Florida. There is one starting again in Orlando, but we're it right now. So let us know if there's anything that you'd like corrected. Carol, would you tell us a little bit about the Pride Parade? Yeah. This is not working. Yeah.
The Pride Parade is Saturday, October 22nd, and Sunday Assembly wants to have a presence there. We're getting a banner and we're going to march. It's not that long to march from. It starts at what's called the Ayers Plaza at University in 7th, Southwest 7th Street. And it just goes downtown. And then there's also a Pride Festival, and we'll have a table there. So we would love to see you walking with us, or at least stop by the table, or if you want to help sit at the table for an hour with us, that'd be great too. So October 22nd.
It is one of the most fun parades. I love it. Yeah. We have a lunch group, and we have been meeting at Francesca's, but we're going to change it this month. And we're going to be meeting on Sunday morning at Jason's Deli. And if we have your email address, we'll be sending you a reminder of this. It's at 11 o'clock on Sunday, October 2nd. It's very casual. It's just a good chance to get to meet people again and have some fun. So, there is going to be next in this room over here a potluck, and food's going to be here, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be setting up some tables and everything, so stay for the potluck, get to know one another a little bit. We hope that you'll come back. Next October, we do not have a speaker yet. We're working on it. However, in November, we will be having Dr. Steve Benner, who will be speaking on the origins of life in the universe. And so check us out in November, but do come back in October because we'll have something wonderful for you and we'll have a good time. We're going to finish with I Had a Hammer, and then we're going to have some lunch if you'd like to stay. Okay.
Just as a bit of an addendum to Jan's stuff, also on the back of the cards, if there's any particular music that you think would be cool to have, we'll see what we can do to try to work it in. I guess at least for the next hour or so, I'm kind of the resident musician, and if they, whether they ask me back or have somebody else, it's always helpful for whoever winds up sitting up here to maybe get some feedback from you folks, because right now we've been kind of picking it out and hoping it flies, but new stuff is always welcome and encouraged. So any of that, feel free to throw that. At one point, I may even put up a tip jar here, and it's not for money, it's for song suggestions. Just think about it, because I know a lot of this, because of a predominance of our collective ages, pulling out some pretty old stuff that some of it may be even older than some of the folks in the room. So we don't want to be stuck in the 60s or anything like that with this stuff. So if there happens to be a Green Day song or something else that somebody thinks would really work well, or REM, whatever, throw it out there. We'll see what we can do to make it a happening thing. Thank you all again for your attention and cooperation today. It's great to hear everybody sing. It's just really cool. So thank you all very much.
Brothers and my sisters, all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out a warning, I'd bring out love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. If I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing out love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. Now I've got a hammer, and I've got a bell, I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between brothers and my sisters all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between brothers and my sisters all over this land, all over this land.
before the assembly is over, if you have any questions, you can ask me, you can ask some of the other people, and join us for lunch if you want.
Lunch is,